Hi, my name is Lindsay. I work for Georgina Public Library, and my vlog today centers around Remembrance Day. So November 5th to the 11th is Veterans Week, commemorating the end of World War II. And then we have Remembrance Day on the 11th, commemorating the end of World War I. So at this time of year, often people's minds turn to war and trying to learn and understand a little bit about it and commemorate those events. I'm also going to talk about some worthy reads around this topic with a nod also to our peacekeeping missions and some of the current conflicts that are going. On that note, we have the Cellist of Sarajevo. This is the audio format. There's also the book format. Excellent book that gives you some insights into the conflict in Bosnia-Herzegovina. These two books are particularly good for obtaining an understanding of what happened in Afghanistan and how that conflict came into being and the impact that's still going on, really, in that arena. We have Shake Hands with the Devil by Roméo Daillaire, who was the head of the peacekeeping force in Rwanda, and his challenges there. An interesting one I tripped across, I thought the title was rather interesting, about Iraq, and this is written by the prosecutor for Charles Manson. So he's an investigative writer now. We have a lot of nonfiction titles on our shelves. Some of them are focused on specific arenas, specific battles, strategies, personalities. Many of them are enhanced information as the archives become released. We had a few new ones come in while we were all on lockdown that people may not be aware. So this one was new to us in March, and it's about the account of an assassination attempt on the Western leaders of in the World War II arena. This one is about the Lebensborn program that Hitler ran, where children were kidnapped, really, and taken out of their families and raised in other families to become ideal Germans. And this is a particular one person's history with that. Again, new to us. This one came in at the end of last year, so fairly new, and I thought the title was interesting. It's Supernatural War. It focuses on World War I and some of the spiritualism and protective talismans and things of that nature that were very much in vogue in that time period. Kind of an interesting read. This one about Canada's worst explosion, I think probably one of the worst explosions in that time frame, the Halifax explosion in World War I. We also have, for those so inclined, a Legion magazine. It's available out of our Sutton branch, and you can put it on hold, and it's a good in-depth reads on specific times, both World War I, World War II. So I've put up a picture of the nonfiction shelves. It's just a snapshot of what we might have in Sutton. About these historical periods is revealed in fiction because it's very absorbing reads. A number of them I've actually mentioned before, so I'm just going to give you sort of a snapshot picture of the titles. These I've featured in other vlogs. Some, as you can see, are available in audiobook. These are all really good reads. Some are narrative nonfiction, so they read like a good story, but they're actually nonfiction. Some are fiction pure, and some are fiction based on truth. Perhaps based on a real event or real people. One of the ones I want to focus on are the historical fiction. So I thought, first of all, we should give a nod to older writers who started this trend immediately after World War II. One of the best, Robert Ludlum, the original Robert Ludlum, not written with someone else. And the Scarlatti Inheritance is a thriller, but it is set during that time period. And Robert Ludlum was always wrote a really good, ripping good read. Early Ken Follett, The Eye of the Needle, and you may have seen the movie as well. And Jack Higgins. Jack Higgins, this one is available on Hoopla ebook. It's part of a series. We do have some of the series Eagle. The Eagles Have Landed, I believe, is his too. But that whole Eagle series is available on audiobook, ebook, and in hardcover book. So Jack Higgins is another good thriller writer that's his setting is in World War II, and you do get a lot of detail on flight squadrons and the battle experience, as well as being entertained with a good thriller. Another modern author in the vein of Alistair MacLean and Jack Higgins. He wrote, Alistair MacLean wrote The Guns of Navarone, Where Eagles Dare, all made into movies that are quite entertaining, but set during those time periods, is Andrew Gross. So we have here The Saboteur, and of course his exceptional The One Man. So this is really reads like a real event and is very gripping, and I think very worth exploring if you're interested in that time period and you like a good thriller. In the vein of nonfiction, some of the narrative nonfiction that reads like a novel, and this one we also have the movie for, The Zookeeper's Wife. This is a true story based on a family, I believe it was in Poland, rescuing not just people but also the animals in the zoo, and keeping all the underground efforts of just ordinary folks to try and save people, and in this case also the zoo. The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, very popular read, one that is written in the format of letters. I'm not really usually a fan of that format, but this particular one is really very good, and it takes place on the island in Guernsey, which was occupied by the Germans, so the only British territory to be occupied by the Germans close to England. A very good read. This one I've featured before, but I thought I'd mention it specifically. It's a Canadian book, but it features a First Nations sniper. So the First Nations people were often placed in positions of snipers. They had very, very, very high skills with through their hunting with rifles. And it also talks a little bit about the code breakers and the role that the Cree language played in that. It was the language of the codes. So it's a very good read. It really evokes the battlefield in World War I. Helen Humphrey's Coventry takes place in that town that was bombed. Churchill knew it was going to be bombed, but had to let it go ahead in order to preserve the secrecy around the code breaking that they had managed to establish, and this takes place in Coventry at the time of the bombing, so it's a good read for getting a sense of what that must have been like. One of the best books in the last couple of years is All the Light We Cannot See. So this takes place in northern France and Paris. It is about a young girl who's blind, French girl, and a young German soldier, and how their lives intersect. It's very, very, very good read. Highly recommended. If you want the perspective from the German soldier, we have All Quiet on the Western Front, a classic book, also made into a movie, written by Erich Maria Remarque. He was a German soldier in World War I, and this evokes his experience in the trenches. Wilbur Smith, classic writer of big books set in South Africa, wrote The Burning Shore, so it gives you the perspective of the war in that arena and how it impacts families. An older author again, but well worth the read. Tatiana de Rosny has written a number of books set in this time period. This is her first one, Sarah's Key, and it was an excellent read all about the roundup of Jewish children in Vichy France. Probably events that most people weren't even aware of. Another really good thriller writer, highly suspenseful, and brings to light the horrific events in China with the rape of Nanking. And this is a thriller set around post-war, but also delving well into that period. Kristen Hanna, well-respected writer, good fiction writer. The Nightingale gives some insight into a young woman who joins the underground resistance in France and what that experience might have been like. This is an interesting one, Suite Française by Irène Namirovsky. Irène was a well-established writer at the time war broke out and subsequent to war. This manuscript was found in her attics by her children after she passed away, and it is her account of occupied Paris and getting out of Paris as the Germans came in. So it's an interesting read because it's based on her manuscript and her experiences, completed by her family after her death. We have Ken Follett again, following up on his Pillars of the Earth series. His next century trilogy starts with The Fall of Giants, which is all about World War I. Quite a good read, extensive, lots of good research in there, and again you get that whole feeling of being there. And then he followed that up with Winter of the World, which is about World War II. A number of books that have come out recently feature women, the role of women in both wars, largely overlooked, largely forgotten or unknown. And so a number of novelists are coming out with books that feature women protagonists in the wars. I have two here recently out. Both of these feature women who were in the nursing corps in World War I, ambulance drivers. They do evoke that time period and what it was like in the field hospitals quite well. A little bit romantic, but gives you some background on that. Churchill's Secretary gives you some insight into the women who were the code breakers. It talks a lot, gives you some nice atmosphere in the underground operations center. You can actually visit that in London, that Churchill and the his leading wartime advisors occupied, and the role of women in the communications and keeping track of all the battlefield and air battle. The Poppy Wife, this is a fairly new one, but it's interesting because it deals with the post-war, between the two wars, and how families were left to try and deal with missing in action or people who had just disappeared, and their efforts to find out more, and the recovery of their remains and things of that nature. So that's this period that's covered in this novel, fairly new one. Another new book, quite well received, The German Midwife. This takes place in the prisoner of war camps, featuring those that tended to not just the prisoners, but they were also called upon many times to tend to the German commandants and their families and the conflicts that engendered in them. It's quite good. The Girls on the Line is a new book. Again, it features women, but in the role of telecommunications. So this is the telephone operators and how key they were for keeping the messages, the communications open on the front lines. And Alice K. Quinn's The Alice Network, extremely popular. Deals with a young woman in, again, underground in the resistance, and the network that was developed called the Alice Network is a real network of women. It does feature some of those real people, and it gives you some idea of the kind of things that they would have had to encounter. I think even better, by the same author, is The Huntress. It's a better written book, and it features the Nachthexen, the Russian women who flew sorties over the German fronts at night in Russia, and that's an area that I think a lot of people don't even realize that there were women fighting in the war. It also deals with the Nazis in America, those that or elsewhere that escaped Germany, and the dilemma that created in hunting or bringing them to justice, and what the factors around that were. So this is quite a good read, actually. It's excellent. So another new one that just came in called Cesare, again from the German perspective. Admiral Canaris, who was the Abwehr commander. And so this is just a fiction novel, but it's about a young man conscripted to the naval warfare in Germany. So new book, probably pretty good. A couple others that I wasn't able to get copies of. The Lilac Girls. The Lilac Girls the cover looks like a romance. The name is really not evocative of what the book is about. It is actually named that way because it was about an organization that called themselves the Lilac Girls. And it's 3 stories. One is Pole in Ravensbrück, another is a German doctor in Ravensbrück, and the third, Carolyn Faraday, a real individual. These were all real individuals who had a network to help orphans of the war from the U.S. and to help these women who came over after the war, who were released from the prison camps. So it's actually a really good read, but you may not be drawn to it based on the cover and the title. That's just some of the reads available to us around this time of year to commemorate, to get us thinking about the sacrifice and the contribution that many just ordinary people, both soldiers and civilians, under great pressure, under great stress, rose to the occasion and what they did. Good reads. Enjoy.